around the region. And if we continue to let these things slide by, and so do the other municipalities, and why would they be different if we're not? Then we are going to see that cumulative degradation of the goals that we profess to want to accomplish take place. Philosophically and morally, I simply can't support that. It's not a horrible development. The applicant is not a horrible applicant. He's done some very good work around the municipality that I've been happy to support. But this one, given what it's a part of, I simply cannot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank the neighbourhood on the Mayor, because at the last meeting, I do believe that they felt that they were not being heard or listened to. And sometimes applicants need to step back and hire someone to go back out and start the discussion. And I think Mr. Tinney has done that quite well for this neighbourhood. I do believe that a lot of their issues have been addressed. I at the original hearing was not prepared to support 6 lots. 5 lots is what I was prepared to support. But I do believe that the Lemaire residents have benefited from the new engagement that has come from Mr. Tinney. So I support the motion. I'm pleased that the parking spaces will be looked at and that that property line won't have to be moved. I definitely want to ensure that a proper construction management plan is in place, and that we don't end up hearing from the neighbors about issues around that. I want to thank the applicant for addressing the rats, because if you sat here last time, the rats, Councillor Sanders and I went out to the site a few times, and the rats were pretty intense. And I remember talking to bylaws and talking to the Lemaire residents and stuff. So I'm pleased that the applicant went out and got rid of the houses, and I'm sure the rats scurried, but I remember he put some poison and stuff down. So rats we live with here, unfortunately. I come from Alberta, we have no rats. So we have a rat patrol in Alberta. I don't know why we don't in BC. I want to also say that, you know, this was a very difficult site, and trying to fit in an infill in any existing neighborhood is very difficult. But I think the applicant, through his Mr. Tinney, has been able to come forward with some changes that are benefit. I remember that nobody wanted panhandles. So I'm glad that one panhandle has been accommodated, because that's one less lot driving out onto Lemaire, which I thought was too many to begin with. I also was concerned when I walked the neighborhoods. I was concerned about the rancher on Wesley, her privacy, and I'm glad that she stood up and said that she now has a better working relationship with the applicant. The members from Lemaire mentioned significant trees that they would like to be saved, and some jigging of the properties and house sites, and that is being accomplished. I think it's important to recognize about tree roots. I too am concerned about tree roots and vehicles driving over them, but I know in other sites that working with our Parks Department and an arborist attached to the project, there are different procedures you can do to ensure that the tree roots don't get impacted. I do like the idea that there's going to be some sort of pillars or whatever, so that this will be seen as a place to come into, and narrowing of that entranceway, because it's going to be a lot of parking. I hope that there's some sensitivity about how that parking will be designed and accommodated, so that it just doesn't look like too much parking, like some landscaping needs to be around there. I was pleased that the owner of the site was saying that he expects to build all of these houses roughly within a year and a half. which makes me feel comfortable for the neighborhood so that they're not having one house built today and another house built a year down the road. So hopefully the project and all the problems, and there will be problems around construction, traffic and whatnot, will happen, and then new neighbors will move into this community. It's a lovely community, and I do think that the applicant has improved this development far more than it was when he first brought it forward to us. So I'm pleased to support it going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Haynes?
Through the Mayor, I too will be supporting this, and I'd like to reflect that I've learnt a lot in these last several months, because compliments to Councillor Brownloff, because she was a proponent, and I didn't understand it fully at the time, of listening and saying to the applicant, I'm not sure you've consulted enough. It could be better if you consulted. And I think the results speak for themselves. I appreciate Laura for calling my visit out there, because in that meeting I was struck by hearing, hey, there's not been any consultation. So I did go and visit that place, and I had some time with Laura and some time with the neighbours across the road. And it's true that the orientation of the house was something I took to James, and it came from the neighbours. And I said, James, this is something they're suggesting about privacy. And there was another one that was mentioned in here too. But it was a case of reducing the density on the mayor. And James said, and I'm going to hire someone who's a specialist in this communication, and he hired Roger Tinney, and I think we see the result of that process. I understand the issues of greenhouse gases. I understand density. And my concern with Saanich is the economic viability of construction. If we're going to do infill, it needs to be done in an economically viable way. And I take to heart a number of houses that are needed to cover the cost of the lot, the cost of the financing, the cost of the building, and still leave that development with the shirt on your back. So I do support the 6 houses, and I'm not sure that it's viable to say on a greenhouse gas basis it should be 3, 4 or 5. Because houses and residents need to go somewhere. I don't think travelling out to Colwood to live is a greenhouse gas solution, but people are doing that in the absence of housing in our municipality. And we have a towns and villages program, which I think is fantastic, and I look forward to that going forward, but we also have an infill program. And infill brings the advantage of the pipes, the roads, the schools are already there. Regarding Halliburton, I agree, it needs attention, but that's a Saanich problem. Halliburton is being looked at by Saanich, and I recall well a couple of candidate debates where Halliburton came up, and people were asking from Cordova Bay, how are we going to solve Halliburton? And I'm sensitive to the issues around that. Cars, cycling, walking and buses. And I'm sensitive to what Councillor Derman is saying about this is car-centric. Yes, it is. And until we get bus services, etc., linked to density, it will remain. But there may be some areas of our municipality that remain car-centric. So as we look at infill, we have to look for all the aspects that would tick off the green box. Solar compatible, yes. Extensive preservation as possible of the trees, yes. Permeable surfaces, yes. Compassion and consultation with our neighbours. And I'll share with you a 4.5-year building experience on my road, which is actually a cul-de-sac, Prospect Lake Road, and there were 7 houses, now there's 8, but 4 of the other houses were renewed, and it took 5 years for this to happen, because they're all individual houses, planning, gave permits, 1 house went in, great, trucks everywhere, cleaned up, then the next house went in, and then the next house went in. And it was interesting to live in that experience, because it just happened after we moved in. And it was disruptive. So I'm pleased to see the developer commit to a timeline of around about 1.5 years, maybe a bit longer, you don't know, with the trades and etc. But what we experienced with these new houses, and I think Lamar may experience this too, is some wonderful young new neighbours just down the street from us. So it's true there'll be 2 additional homes there, and there's an impact on your privacy, which is being mitigated through the sensitivity showing. But I think 2 new families on the Mare, as you go forward, it will add to the social vibrancy. So that's the other part of sustainability. If this was left empty, I think it would be less rich as a social community. I do have several other things I could talk about, but I think you've got the gist. I think the pushback from council for more consultation has worked very well. The community has stood together, and I'm particularly impressed that several residents felt they were so well regarded through the process that they came to speak in favour of the application. It's been an interesting 6 months, and I appreciate council's push on this, and I appreciate the current level of this development, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bryce, did you have your hand up over here?
I did, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think we've had a pretty exhaustive rendition of all the benefits of this particular project, but I would like to also add my comments here. I think that this sort of discussion that has gone on over the last few years about what to do with this particular piece of property was cast in the days when the original subdivision went in and this remnant of an agricultural piece was left, and now here, surrounded by various cul-de-sacs and other sort of lovely curved roads and such, it was left the task of how to take this particular last piece of property and to have it fit in, and I think the project that's before us here tonight fills that bill. Mr. Gardner has a tremendous reputation in our community, and we can go about and see his work. He's a man of his word, and I think that goes a long way when you bring a project like this forward, and you've got your reputation on the line. So I'm glad that someone with that background in our community has taken on this particular piece of property, because there were others before who tried to work this through. I'd like to acknowledge of course, the Community Association supported this. The general neighbours did, and obviously had received their assurances and comfort from Mr. Gardner some time ago, and I too was pleased to see they made the effort to come out tonight to acknowledge that, because it's a lot easier just to accept the fact that you got your preferences attended to and then just not come forward. So I think it speaks well for that neighbourhood and the people who came out to recognise the work that had been done. And to the residents on Lamar, I think the amazing presentation, in some respects, I think must make it a lot easier for a developer, because when the neighbourhood, the immediate neighbourhood, knows very specifically what success would look like to them, the developer can at least acknowledge and work with that. Oftentimes you hear people come out and just in sort of vague terms say they're against something. And that's a very difficult thing for a developer to move then ahead and to come to some kind of completion. So it took all the parties working together, and I think that's why this project that is before us is obviously going to get approval.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too will be supporting this. I feel that it's come a long way from where we were before. I left the meeting a year ago, obviously, and looking at the what was there and what was going to happen to Lemaire, and that bizarre 3 houses there, and everybody was going to have to back out into each other's driveways, and you know, it was a case of trying to, you know, jam yourself into a size 8 when you're a size 50. Or anyway, I'm pleased to see there's been some work. You've reduced the number of lots. The 4 or 5 lots, yes, would be for me much more appropriate. But however, we've come to this. I think the things have been worked out. There's issues that Lemaire still has, but I do believe that. Recognizing that this little 2 lots will be separate from Lemaire, they will be their own little enclave there, and by Supporting the number of parking spaces will help. I am Councillor Brownow's colleague that has the parking issues on the cul-de-sac, and let me tell you, there are issues. As far as the parking spaces and how they get used, we resolved ours in our strata. There are signs in there that it's not for visitors. That they're visitor parking, but the residents themselves can't be using them. So, and we do have the resident parking police that oversee that. So it just takes a bit of vigilance to have people not park out into your neighborhood. And I thank the residents there on Lemire for being vigilant and working with Mr. Toomey and Mr. Gardner to make this work through. A couple of things I also want to mention is the building footprints. I do hope, we've talked about this here, that's not about the building envelope, that the applicant does make sure that the building scheme represents footprints and not envelopes. I don't want to come out of this year and a half from now and find out that indeed these houses have been moved someplace else on the property. So I trust that that won't happen. As far as the building scheme, there's a number of things that the approving officer will actually be the one that will make the call on these, and I trust that this information that we've discussed tonight will go to the approving officer and be followed up on. I, like Councillor Dermott, agree that the Coteau Bay Ridge is not the place to be building. It is council-centric. There are no amenities. We, like our colleagues before us in the 60s that decided to build out the whole of Gordon Head, and it was the previous council that put a coffee shop on Tyndall, I believe it was, and it's a real plus for the neighborhood. But other than that, you know, you've got to get in that car and move around, and it's certainly the case in Cadova Bay, and that really is not sustainable in some ways, flies in the face of what we believe in Saanich. However, I don't think anybody's ever going to give up the love of the automobile, at least not in my lifetime. And so I'm quite pleased now to support this. It's come a long way, and I trust that it will look back and say this was a good decision and a good asset into this community. Thank you.
Any more comments from council before I deliver some comments myself and call the question on this? I'd like to thank members of the community for coming forward. The first presentation was quite substantial. It certainly helped me understand better how far this project had come from the original February proposal that I was first introduced to the one that we see today. I think it's moved quite a distance to the ideal that the community would like to have. The community does seem to be largely content with the changes that have been made, and I don't think it was well communicated to you, Mr. Gardner, last time when I voted against this at that stage, but it was my concerns about community consultation and the issues that were left hanging that had me vote the way that I did. But I'm happy to say that I can support this now. And with that, I'll call the question on this motion. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Dermott is opposed. Motion carries. So I'd like to introduce a second motion for a second reading of bylaw number 9316.
Second.
I'll call the question on that. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Dermott is opposed. Motion carries. And the third reading of bylaw number 9316. I'll call the question on that. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Dermott is opposed. The motion carries. And finally, motion for the proposed lot 3 to be exempted from the statutory requirements to provide a minimum 10% perimeter road frontage under section 944, subsection 2 of the Local Government Act.
Second.
I'll call the question on that. In favor? Opposed? Councillor Dermott is opposed. Motion carries. All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on to the final item on our agenda, number 3. Madam Clerk, would you please introduce the item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This next item is 3999 Cedar Hill Road. This is zoning bylaw 2003, amendment bylaw 2015, number 9346. This is to rezone Lot A of Plan 17356 at 3999 Cedar Hill Road from RS10 to RT4 in order to construct a 5-unit townhouse development. A development permit will be considered to require the buildings and lands to be constructed and developed in accordance with the plans submitted, and to allow variances for siting, height, extend the allowable projections, and fence height. A covenant will also be considered. Council is in receipt of the report of the Director of Planning dated July 24, 2015 and June 9, 2015, recommending approval of the rezoning application and development permit and the final reading of the zoning amendment and modification application of the development permit be withheld pending registration of the covenants, securing the following: construction of a development to meet the Build Green and Gold or Energy Guide 82 standard or equivalent, installing air-sourced air pumps and necessary conduit for solar ready and unit for each unit, contribution of $7,500 to the Saanich Affordable Housing Fund, provision of $5,000 fund to support alternative housing transportation costs, including bus passes, bicycle and mobility scooters, and providing $2,500 to Saanich as a donation through to the Shelburne Community Kitchen. Council is also in receipt of a letter from the applicant dated July 21st, 2015, report from the Advisory Design Panel, one letter from the Gordon Head Residents Association. That is the extent, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for staff before I ask the applicant forward? Seeing none, I'll ask the applicant to come forward to the microphone.
Dear Mayor and Council, my name is Jamie Gill with SEBA Construction, and we are the applicants. I'm here tonight with Pradeep Misra from Misra Architects and Julie Lemorse from LAVR there. And I'll just briefly go over some of the changes that we made from our previous application. And then Pradeep Misra will discuss the building and design, and Julie will discuss the landscape there. There was some clarification needed on the 1-year bus passes there. We decided to place $5,000 into our lawyer's trust account, and the seller would have to produce documentation for a receipt for some sort of transportation, either be a bus pass, a bike, scooter, etc. Something that suits their needs. Some people may not need a bus pass, they'd rather use a bike. So I thought that was a good way to approach that issue there. And then the other was a community contribution, speaking to the Shelburne Community Kitchen, donating $2,500 there. They said they would use it towards upgrading some things that Saanich required as their water line and their refrigeration units. And the other issue was getting some garden plots onto the project there. And we've shown 3 optional garden areas that could be done, and additionally adding hose bibs to each patio. So if you have pots on your patio, you're able to water them there. So we think we've answered all the concerns raised at the committee of the whole meeting. We are dedicated to the Energy Guide 82 or Build Green and Gold level, and again, just on our community consultation, our sign's been up since about 1.5 years now. We did send out letters for a 9-meter radius to host a community meeting in, I believe it was November 2014, and we had 2 folks come to the meeting. Again, one concern was parking during construction, and we hope to obviously use the Canadian Tire parking lot that's always empty, with obviously their consent first. And the other was, obviously it's a nice project, just be really careful of the trees there. So I'll just pass it over to Pradeep Misra to take over from here. Thank you.
Your Worship, member of the Council, public, staff. Staff has already explained the project in detail. In short, I'd like to say is there are 5 townhouses, 10 parking spots, plus we have the bicycle parking. With that, I'd like to add our concept. Our concept was to retain all the trees to the south of the property, abutting the parking lot, and push the building as far away as possible to the north to stay away from the root zone these mature trees. So we push the building to the north. The building envelope itself is 4.5 meter from the north and 4.5 meter from the east. And from the south is 7.8 meters and 7.5 from the front west property line. Now, except that west property line, we have a porch in there, so that encroaches in the front setback to 5.8. And similarly on the north side, we wanted to treat the north side of this whole project as the front yard to this development. And so what we had there was some patios, the balconies, and the balconies was cantilevered over, and they were about 2 meters. They are 2 meters from the property line, north property line, but their support columns is 3 meters from the north property line. So with that, I'd like to add that last committee of the whole meeting, there were some nice comments made, which our landscape architect has already incorporated in their design, which she is going to explain. With that, if there are any questions, I will be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members from, questions from council for the applicant? Councilor Haynes.
I have one small question. There was the remark that there was going to be some growing areas. I'm not clear. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Julie Lommers from Ladder Landscape Architects.
Did you plan that segment?
Yeah. It's all timed.
We could put one back.
I'm just going to forward this. So, nothing really has changed on the plan since our last meeting, except for 2 things. One was a note to add, or I think this would have happened anyway, but just to assure that there would be a hose bib associated with each unit, so that if each of the units would like to do container gardening on their patio or their balcony, that would be something that they could accomplish. And this this small area to the east, we calculated that if the residents who moved into this particular development would like to do some gardening, that some of the ornamental planting that's planted along that you could actually get 3 plots, reasonably sized plots going along here. And I think that's on your new plan. We've just, highlighted, where that could happen. But our approach would be that perhaps that would be something that the residents who move in could decide if that's what they'd like to do. So that could be quite a nice little sort of vegetable patch, I guess you could say, if that were something that people were interested in. But just to sort of remind you of our 3 approaches to the landscape one was to create an attractive landscape, for the residents, and we did that through the gardening, etc. The second was to ensure that there was an attractive public walkway, along the street as well as along the pathway, and so that people who are walking by could view the gardens that are attached to each unit, and that front garden area would face Cedar Hill, so kind of more of a residential kind of landscape. And the third one was to retain the existing trees. So 5 of the 8 existing trees are going to be retained. The majority of them are between the units and the Canadian Tire parking lot. And we've enhanced that to try and, to protect those trees. We've increased the planting underneath those trees, added some understory trees so that the screening could be improved over time, and we've also ensured that there would be permeable paving throughout that driveway. Yeah, and so that's all to maintain those trees. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions from council, I'll now open it up to public input. If there are members of the public that wish to speak for or against this application, please come to the microphone. Calling for a second time? Calling for a third time? Okay, seeing none. Seeing that there is a number of questions from council, I'll close the public input period and I'll look to council for a decision. Councilor Plant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation.
Would you like to speak to it?
No, sir.
All right, then I'll go over to Councilor Derby, who has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is in fact an ideal location for density. It is inside of a major center for a municipality in the future, and it is recognized in regional planning, both. Interestingly enough, I still have a lot of concerns. It's an interesting night for me tonight in that respect. The problem is that when we do these major centers, where we're going to create places where we want more people to live, rather than in single family and continuing to sprawl out and create a lot of problems for us. To do that, we really want to make them an attractive alternative to single family living. We don't want to create the situation that you either have single family or you get substantially second best. That's just not desirable. To do that, to get that equity between the two housing styles, single family and denser neighborhoods, it's absolutely critical, the amenity plan that you build on. And especially in that amenity plan, adequate green space, open space, public spaces of all type. The best way you can do these kinds of developments, and Vancouver, City of Vancouver has demonstrated that very, very well, is to have a single applicant who is able to assemble a large piece of land and put things together. They did that first of all with 12th and Arbutus, subsequently with the old Expo lands, False Creek North, Cole Harbor, and so forth. Remarkable, because when somebody has control of all the property, they have opportunities to place considerable density in certain places and the economic wherewithal to provide the open spaces and amenity that you need.